King Moses the best storyteller.
The towering glass walls of Adebanjo Enterprises gleamed under the Lagos sun, a symbol of Kunle Adebanjo's immense success. From the outside, Kunle had it all: a flourishing business, connections with the elite, and a lavish lifestyle that most could only dream of. But beneath the surface, his heart was a battlefield of pain, guilt, and lingering questions. His wife, Amara, had died under mysterious circumstances 2 years ago, and despite the official reports calling it an accident, whispers of foul play never quite disappeared. Kunle, sitting in his expansive office, looked out over the Lagos skyline. His office was the very definition of power: mahogany furniture, high-tech screens displaying stock updates, and the soft hum of air conditioning. Yet the emptiness gnawed at him. He had buried himself in work since Amara's death, building walls so high that no one could see through his pain. Even now, as he stared at the reflection of himself in the window, he couldn't help but feel haunted by her absence. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Betrayal, his longtime friend and business partner, with the day's updates. Kunle barely registered Betrayal's presence as he handed him a file. "Kunle, we need your signature on these contracts before the end of the day." Kunle nodded absently, flipping through the file without really reading it. His mind was elsewhere, on the phone call he'd received that morning, the one that had set his heart racing. It was a voice from the past, a cryptic message suggesting that someone knew more about Amara's death than they were letting on. "Kunle, you alright?" Betrayal's voice snapped him back to the present. "Yeah, just tired," Kunle muttered, signing the documents. But Betrayal didn't leave. He lingered, as if sensing something was off. "You know, you've been different ever since Amara." Betrayal hesitated. "I just want to remind you that you don't have to go through this alone. If you ever need to talk." "I'm fine, Betrayal," Kunle interrupted sharply. "We have a company to run." Betrayal sighed, taking the hint, and walked out of the office. Kunle leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He couldn't afford to appear weak, not now, not ever. But the truth was, he wasn't fine. The guilt weighed on him, a constant reminder of his failure to protect Amara. On the other side of town, Titi Oilowo sat in the dimly lit newsroom of Lagos Daily, staring at her computer screen. She was one of the paper's rising stars, an ambitious, sharp-eyed journalist who had a knack for digging up stories no one else could find. Recently, she'd been assigned to investigate a series of high-profile corruption cases linked to some of Lagos's most powerful business tycoons. And at the center of her investigation was none other than Kunle Adebanjo. Titi had always admired Kunle from a distance. His rise from humble beginnings to becoming one of the most influential figures in Lagos was nothing short of remarkable. But beneath the glitz and glamour, she suspected there was something darker at play. Several anonymous tips had pointed to shady deals, backdoor negotiations, and questionable connections between Adebanjo Enterprises and government officials. What intrigued her most, though, was the death of Kunle's wife, Amara. The official narrative was thin, and rumors suggested there was more to the story. As she gathered her notes and prepared for the meeting with her editor, a curious detail caught her eye. A document she had uncovered in her research, a financial transaction involving a shell company, had the name Amara Adebanjo attached to it. Titi's heart skipped a beat. What could Amara possibly have been involved in that tied her to these corruption cases? She quickly jotted down her thoughts, excitement building in her chest. This was the break she needed. Later that day, Titi found herself in the lobby of Adebanjo Enterprises, waiting for her scheduled interview with Kunle. The building's opulence was almost overwhelming: marble floors, gold accents, the scent of money everywhere. She smoothed out her blouse, trying to maintain her composure. This wasn't just a typical interview. She knew she was walking into something much bigger. Connor's secretary escorted her into his office. The man behind the desk was even more imposing in person, tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through her. His presence filled the room, commanding attention without uttering a word. As Titi sat down across from him, she could feel the tension crackling in the air. "So, MS. Oilowo," Connor began, his voice calm but with an edge to it. "What can I do for you today?" Titi smiled politely, pulling out her notepad. "I'm writing a piece for Lagos Daily on prominent business leaders in Nigeria, and I'd like to ask you a few questions about your company, your rise to success, and a few other things." Connor raised an eyebrow. "Other things?" "Yes," Titi continued. "I've been looking into some financial records, and I noticed a peculiar transaction involving a shell company linked to your late wife, Amara." Connor's expression darkened instantly. "I don't discuss my wife," he said coldly, leaning back in his chair. "I understand that her death was tragic," Titi pressed carefully, "but this transaction..." "Stop." Connor's voice cut through the air like a blade. "I agreed to this interview because I assumed it was about business. If this is some kind of tabloid attempt to drag my wife's name through the mud, I will not tolerate it." Titi felt her pulse quicken. "I'm not trying to drag her name through anything. But there are questions that need answers. You must know that." Connor stood up, towering over her. "Miss Oilowo, I think we're done here. I have my assistant see you out." Titi met his gaze, unflinching. "I think you know more than you're letting on, Mr. Odebanjo." Connor's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she thought he might explode. But then, just as quickly as the tension had risen, it dissipated. Connor walked to the window, his back to her. "My wife is dead, Mrs. Oilowo. Let her rest." The silence in the room was suffocating. Titi gathered her things and stood to leave, her mind racing. As she exited the building, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had touched a nerve, one that could unravel everything. That night, Titi sat in her small apartment, staring at the notes from the interview. Something wasn't adding up. Why had Connor been so defensive? And what was the connection between Amara and the shell company? As she pondered over the details, her phone buzzed. It was an email from an anonymous sender. The subject line read, "Amara's Secrets." With trembling fingers, Titi opened the email. There was no text, just an attachment. She clicked on it, and her screen filled with a scanned document. It was a letter written by Amara, dated a week before her death. The words sent chills down Titi's spine. "They are coming for me. I don't know who to trust anymore, not even Connor. If something happens to me, find the truth. It's all connected. Don't believe what they tell you. I'm scared. I don't know how much longer I can keep this secret." Titi's mind raced as she read the letter over and over. What secret had Amara been keeping? And who was coming for her? Suddenly, the stakes felt much higher. This wasn't just about corruption or a business scandal. This was about life and death, and Titi had just stepped into a web of danger far beyond her imagination. As Titi closed her laptop, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. She had found her hidden connection, one that could unravel everything Connor Odebanjo had built. But as the night grew darker, so did her realization that she had just crossed into dangerous territory. And she had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side.